This is a Fleet Success Show, dedicated to helping you and your fleet succeed using the experience of fleet professionals and Hall of Fame fleet legends. The show that explores how the pillars of stakeholder satisfaction, intentional culture, resource efficiency, and risk management all combine to lead your fleet to success. We're glad you're here. Now, let's get into the show. Hey, welcome back for another episode of the Fleet Success Show with your hosts, Josh Turley, Steve Saltzgiver.
Hey there.
And today we have Steve is always a very special guest, but obviously a alumni of the show and has been one of our hosts for many, many episodes. I think 100 you had under your belt.
Is that me? Wow.
But we brought you in today as we were talking about it's 100 best season with NAFA. The applications are open, and we thought, hey, you're going to be in office. Let's have a little chat and give some advice to people who might be on the fence, people who are thinking about applying and just don't know what to do. So I'll hit you with a few questions and talk about NAFA 100 Best. So for those who don't know what NAFA 100 Best is, it's NAFA is the premier fleet association in the country. And they have a program that they got from Tom Johnson. This is a long time running program that he used to run. They've now kind of taken over posthumously for Tom, as they recognize 100 of the best public fleets in America. There's an application process you go through, and they have judges. You guys have put a ton of work into this over the years as you've tried to really give it some rigidity and just some structure so that it's not totally loosey-goosey and, a popularity contest that it might have been in the past. As much as we love that, and how it used to be, it needed some structure, right? And you guys have done a great job in creating that in the application process. But you've seen, how many years have you been doing the judging of 100
I think
Best?
this is my seventh year, I think. Yeah.
And so one of the things that NAFA did really early on was, like, Tom used to do this all by himself, and then they brought in
Tom actually brought me in
just to kind of help out. I go back he was just getting too many applications at some point.
Yeah.
And so he brings you in, and NAFA takes over, and they start bringing in other judges because there's just a lot of applications that are going through. And because we're trying to narrow this down to the top 100 fleets.
Yeah.
So you have to imagine if you have 100 fleets that get awards, there's a lot of fleets that don't. So there's a lot of applications you have to sift through.
Any given year we have close to 200, probably double the 100.
And it's only been getting more. I remember it used to be 130, and it was 160, and now it's over 200.
I remember the first year I did it for Tom, I barely got 100.
Right? You're like, oh.
So they all won.
And then it's really just a matter of ranking, right? Yeah. But you've seen a lot of applications. You've seen a lot of applications come through over 7 years, hundreds of applications every year. Just off the top of your head, when you think about the ones that place really well, maybe not even the winners, because the winners, I have to imagine, this is really difficult to pick a winner every single year.
It is. It's getting more difficult every year, and we keep suggesting maybe we need to go do site visits at this point.
Yeah.
It's getting that.
Just to kind of see it and just that little extra edge.
Well, and as a consultant, working for RTA and has seen hundreds of fleets.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll get to 100 best, I'll see the banners in the wall, and I'm going, oh my gosh, this should not have been 100 best fleet.
Right.
And I know that sounds terrible. Or I get to one that was ranked lower, and I'm going, oh man, this should have been a real high ranked fleet. Yeah. That's kind of the challenge. There's a little bit of, you try and make this as objective as possible, but until you really see where the rubber meets the road out there, you really can't do a decent job totally.
So there's a little bit of art to it.
Yeah, there
is. Which is,
Yeah.
and how well can you tell your story?
Right.
How well can you tell your story in the format that NAFA has? And we'll talk a little bit about that format, but being able to see a fleet in person definitely would help, kind of solidify some
Especially
things.
maybe the top 2 or 3.
Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe even, top 5.
Yeah.
Because I have to imagine that the margin of error between those starts getting
so
really
close.
razor thin.
Oh, yeah. We're out multiple decimal points.
Yeah. That's tight. That's, and for people who apply and you don't rank as high as you wish you would, like, that's the piece that is just kind of like take it, I guess, as some consolation, is just how tight those margins really are between, if you're a number 50 and you're like, oh man, I really wanted to be in the top 50, I want to be number 45. Well, you probably weren't very far off.
No, it's really close. In fact, we look at that every year. We've had to put tiebreakers into our matrix that we use. We have a rubric that we use, and we've had to do a number of things. Where you placed last year compared to this year, and So we've really tried to make it as fair as possible. But there's so many dynamics that happen. So you may not have applied last year, but then you apply the year after, or someone really whiz-bang applies that throws everybody down, and so you could be 2 one year and 15 the next year and go, what happened? I did better things and I dropped.
Yeah.
And it does.
Because it's always kind of like,
Yeah.
you have to assume it's a ranking.
Yep.
So you're always grading on a curve.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like just, your score might have gone from an 89 to a 92, but the rest of the class caught up. Yeah. And so that's always tough to kind of plan around. So as you've gone through, you looked at all these applications. What would you say separates maybe like the top 10, because it's tough to differentiate between maybe 10 and 1. What would you say separates the top 10 from the bottom 10? The 90 through 100 versus the 10 through 1.
Well, first of all, you have to answer every single question.
Okay.
We actually get applications where people don't answer every question.
That seems like a kind of a gimme.
Yeah.
All right. So be thorough, number one.
Be thorough.
Okay.
Second, you want to make sure you have key metrics. Some of those are kind of provided for you in the application. Some of them in previous webinars we've done, things like that. So you should have a pretty good idea what the key metrics are, like fleet availability, preventive maintenance compliance, things like that. And then in your application, make sure you articulate exactly what it is and show a proven track record. For example, give me a 5-year glide path. What have you been doing with fleet availability? Where did you start? Where are you at today? Because those are the things. That's really what this is about, is continuous improvement. And showing that you have a plan. Other things, give us examples. I mean, there's no reason you can't attach things.
Yeah.
And give us an annual report with graphs and charts and, things like that.
And just for reference, if you haven't gone through the application process, there's 12 questions. 12, yeah. And it's basically paragraph answers, right? Yes. You're limited to, I think, a certain number of characters in each of those answers. Don't get crazy wordy. But there's not a spot to put in images and things like that in the form.
That's correct.
So what you need to do is, to Steve's point, do attachments. You can attach graphs, you can attach KPIs, you can attach full-on reports if you want to.
Pictures of your team, you can attach pictures of your shop. Anything that the judges can really look at objectively. The more information we get, the better it is for us.
And keep in mind, they're not coming out to your site, so whatever you can do to give them information as if they were there would be really helpful.
Yeah, show us how highly organized your shop is, how the lines are painted yellow, your brand new lifts, things like that. Those things are really helpful as we're going through those applications, especially when you get to those small margins that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. And you're sitting there looking at 2 applications, and they both answered the 12 questions really nicely. Now you're into the addendums, right? And who has prettier looking charts, who has data that's really easy to see, who has really nice, you're looking at the pictures of the teams. And that's where the margin calls really come into play. Because as much as you try to make it objective, it still ends up being very subjective, so.
And I always tell people, it always reminds me when I originally met Tom, one of the conversations he had with me years ago was, I love having you speak at my conferences because you always tell stories. Tell stories.
Yeah.
People relate to stories, and if you can articulate a story in your application or even in the addendum that you provide, those just they make things real.
Yeah.
So
it brings it home. It shows you what's going on, and it's like, oh yeah, I've been in a situation like that before. Or I can appreciate how hard that is to do because I've done that. And it does. You got to tell the story, and be able to really demonstrate to the judges why you're doing better than you were last year, the challenges that you've overcome, and why you're worthy of a 100 best fleet ranking.
Yeah.
Okay. Be thorough. So my favorite one. That's the number one. Just answer all the questions.
It always amazes me when somebody will turn in half an application. I go, well, maybe they got too busy and they just didn't bother to withdraw it.
And I could see that.
Yeah,
you get busy,
happen.
and you've got 2 months to do it. But we're natural procrastinators. I know how this works. But as you're sitting there trying to answer the questions too, I could see somebody starting the application and they're like, I'm not really sure how to answer that, and then just skipping it.
The other thing
rather
too,
than just not answering it.
I would say be as concise as possible. We've got applications 100 pages long, so those are tough to get through.
Yeah.
So be concise.
Because no one goes to school for fleet management, chances are you were never formally trained on how to successfully lead a fleet. That's where the Fleet Success Playbook comes in. The Fleet Success Playbook is your guide to building a safe, reliable, and efficient fleet that provides exceptional service. Learn all about the 4 pillars of fleet success: stakeholder satisfaction, intentional culture, resource efficiency, and risk management. Get nearly 100 years of combined advice on common challenges, practical solutions, actionable tips, and real examples from fleet industry experts who have been there and done that. Visit www.fleetsuccessplaybook.com to request your free copy today.
Well, because what'll happen is, this is human nature. If somebody drops a 100-page report in front of me, I have to skim it. I just don't have enough time, because from the time you guys close the application window in January, right, end of January, we've got to pick the winners and do all of that by INE, which is typically mid to late April.
I think we have to have it done by February 28th.
And you guys have a deadline before
we got
that.
like 30 days.
Yeah, so it's tight. So if you give them a 100-page and their timeline alone dictates, they're going to skim it. They're not even going to read all that detail you put in there, and then you're just basically giving it up to them to skim and find the things that matter most. And then you may as well just leave it up to luck at that point. So
the other thing
be
too
concise.
is know where you are when it comes to your metrics. What is the industry best practice? We have people all the time that think they're really doing great with PM compliance at 70%. Well, you might be compared to where you were, but if you were to outsource your fleet, you'd accept nothing less than 95%. Right. So make sure you know where you are relative to those known best practices in the industry.
Yeah, well, and I really understand what they are, right? I think a lot of people just assume that it's, I've talked to my buddy or I talked to my other peer and they're at this, so I must be doing better than them. Yeah. And they got, place number 35 last year. Yeah. Well, yeah, but that was one metric, and that one metric actually is keeping them from being number 25, right? So it's, you definitely have to understand what the actual industry best practice is.
Yeah, same thing with labor rates, things like that. We have people that will put in a $35 labor rate and think they're very highly efficient, and if you've seen some of our podcasts, you know that that's not the way to go. Yep. That just makes your fleet older in the long run, But we see that all the time. Yeah. And, I keep thinking, man, these guys.
It's always so ironic because they'll use that as like a bragging point. Like, no, you're missing the boat.
Yeah. So
you definitely understand fleet benchmarks, understand how you're doing against the benchmark. I will tell you one piece of advice I always give people is just apply, do as best you can with the questions, answer them all. But then you get your rating and then talk to the judges afterwards. A lot of people don't realize that you can go talk to the judges either at any INE or you can set up time afterwards. And you guys are more than happy to talk through their application and say, oh, well, this is why we ranked you down here, where we marked you down here. And if you don't know what the benchmarks are, that's a great time to say, well, I have a 70% PM compliance ratio. What would you guys like to see there? Yeah. What should I be driving on next year when I apply? And it's like a little free consulting gig that you guys get out of this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the best thing you can do is I would always tell people apply. Mm-hmm. No matter what, just apply. Even if you don't think you're going to be in the top 100, just apply because it becomes a learning experience for you. Yeah. And then you start asking the questions like Josh has said, and then we start giving you some of the answers and some of the tips, and then that will improve your operation the next year. So just keep applying and keep applying, and like anything else, your application will be a continuous improvement project.
I'd actually be curious because I know there's several fleets who have applied for years and decades, right? It's almost as long as Tom's been doing it. I'd be curious to go back in time and look at some of their early applications and then compare it to their recent applications. Now, obviously, you have things like fleet manager change and things of that nature, but I'd be curious if you've had the same consistent fleet manager year over year, just how that's drifted over time and how well they've done at improving their own process. I got to imagine talking to people is every year it gets a little tighter, it gets a little easier, it gets a little simpler, and they can tell it better.
That's the other tip I'd tell you, too, is once you win or you place, don't rest on your laurels.
Nope.
Because we see a lot of people that, they finally hit that pinnacle and then they don't do near as many things or projects or
they think I've done it, I've arrived, right? And they get done.
They just slowly slide downhill is what happens. So.
Well, and then they wonder, well, why am I not doing well? Like I'm a 100 best fleet winner. It's like, well, you were. Yeah. And again, the curve shifts. You get, better, brighter fleets that come in.
It's like the BHAG we talk about.
Yeah.
You got to keep setting the BHAG. You got to set that bar high, continually move it.
One of my favorite things, though, is when you walk into a shop and you see 7 or 8 banners consecutive years across the top, right? Which just shows that they've been consistent, that they keep applying. And whether or not the numbers improve every year, it doesn't matter as much to me. It's kind of cool to see that. But it does show me as like they really care about it and they're putting in the time and energy every single year versus just seeing one banner. It's like, good job, you did it once.
The other thing I say too is get your entire team involved in it.
Yeah.
This is not a fleet manager award. This is a team award. And they need to participate and understand what you're doing and how their contribution is to the culture and the organization. And there's several culture questions. You know, that's part of this application, which if you, as you listen to RTA, you know, we're big on culture. You know, and so think about, I just had actually a webinar earlier this morning where that was the question is asked. And I've always believed as a fleet manager, that's the one thing you control is your culture. You know, people, oh no, I got a union, I got that. No, you can control your culture. It's just, you have to tiptoe around some things sometimes. Yeah. But, you know, you can't control above you, typically, but you can control below you. You know, so, you know, I think that's when I first met you. That's what really intrigued me to come to RTA is because of the culture and how you can control that. So make sure you answer those questions in the application honestly, delicately, and you know, we're talking about rewards, recognition, celebration, collaboration, things like that that are just normal in a workplace that need to happen. So get your team involved in that.
Yeah. Well, and then get them involved too, because they're the ones that when you do win, you want to share that award with them because you're going to share it with, you know, city council, you're going to share it with your higher ups, with the VPs, you know, whoever's in charge of that maintenance in your division. And, you know, make sure you brag them up and help them feel like, hey, we did something, you know. All right, so one of the big things that's been on my mind with NAFA 100 Best is the shift towards, obviously, ChatGPT changed the world when it launched a few years ago. I'm curious how you've seen that impact the 100 Best applications.
I've seen everything from one that I suspected they might have rewritten a few sentences to the whole application was done in AI.
That's funny. Okay.
Yeah, so it is becoming an issue. We're starting to feel like we need to get some teacher training to spot AI now. I would say, you know,
you're like looking for M dashes and like, you know, it's semicolons and like different punctuation. Yeah.
What I would say though is, like I've learned with ChatGPT, you have to know your craft. Yes. Because AI will basically lie. That's just a fact.
It's sycophancy. Yeah. Like there's a word for this, by the way.
Exactly. Yeah. And so if you're going to use it, you better know how to be a fleet manager because it will say things in your application that you may not even know about. And so that's really my biggest thing is make sure if you're going to do any research, make sure you get citations and URLs and things like that. I've actually had it make up fleet stuff. Okay. And thankfully for me, I've been in almost 5 decades in fleet, so I usually can spot the BS, you know, wherever I see it. But if you're a brand new fleet manager, you may not be able to spot the BS, and then now you're given an application to 4 other people like me that have been in fleet. So we're going to call it out. You know? So
I think one of my favorites is when I see the words like certainly. You know, when you see the first word in the paragraph is certainly, here's some examples, right? It's like literally just the prompt response in ChatGPT. Whenever you prompt it, it'll, oh yeah, here's a thing. Then it'll just spit it out. And every time I see that, I'm like, oh, you used ChatGPT for this, and then you didn't do the due diligence to clean it up and make it your own.
Yeah, you definitely need to proofread it. Yeah. You know, I think there's nothing wrong with using AI to get you started. Maybe put a little structure behind things, but do not take that as absolute. Yeah. That's like we write reports all the time. We use it as a starter, but we don't use it as an absolute.
Yeah, it definitely makes the application process easier, but don't use it as a full-on crutch. You know?
I actually did a couple judging using AI last year. I think it might be a future for this.
Okay.
I put in the criteria, and I said, you know, here's where I want you to score between here and there using this. We have like the rubric, and it can actually do it, but in my opinion, it scored too high. So
it's a little generous, a little, you know,
too generous.
AI tends to do that.
But I think at some point down the road, I think it will take a lot of the subjectivity out.
Yeah.
You know, if we were able to figure out the right algorithm to do that.
I gotta imagine that's probably just like some really good prompt engineering would get us close to that.
It would, and I think
Yeah.
it's possible. I think none of us at this point have that background enough to do the problem.
Well, and so if you are going to use ChatGPT or Claude or anything like that, there are settings that you can go into to kind of turn down the sycophancy, right? Turn down the hallucination that just wants to say it's a yes man, right? Because ChatGPT is a total yes man. If you didn't know this,
Oh, yeah.
And so you have to tell it like.
So is Grok, though.
Yes, very much. Like, I'll tell you whatever you want to hear. I want to be your best friend, right? It's like a little puppy dog. But you have to tell it, it's like, no, I want you to challenge all of my assumptions, and I want you to, really prove out, like, I want this idea or whatever we come up with to be bulletproof, and it'll flip the gears on you.
It will.
And all of a sudden you'll be like, whoa, all right, ChatGPT is a little mean, and
I've got to the point where it knows Steve Saltzgiver now on ChatGPT.
Yeah.
It even quotes Steve back to Steve.
oh yeah, it's totally crazy.
Yeah, and I tell it flat out, do not give me any BS on this thing.
Yeah,
And it doesn't anymore. It learns me,
yeah.
which is that's scary in itself.
It knows you're going to call it on its stuff,
Yeah.
right? And I've definitely done that a few times. Like, this is not adequate. Like, I expect better from you and all this. I was
Exactly.
scolding it like a little child.
I do. I treat it like an intern or a young child. That's exactly
Yeah.
how I treat it.
But yeah, so if you're going to use ChatGPT, just make sure you're turning down the yes man, and you're turning up the scrutiny and turning up the challenge so that it's really writing something. And you can even try to do that, right? I don't know if the Steve Saltzgiver model is public. Oh, that would actually be something we could do. It's pretty easy. Like, we could build a GPT for NAFA, 100 best. I'm going to put this in the idea bank. In the style of Steve, Scott, Danny, and
Those are the-
Michael. Yeah.
Yeah, three main words.
And you go through that process and be like, all right, we're gonna build a GPT for U4, and then we'll submit our applications through that. It's just like, hey, we'll help you build this, and then you can submit the real thing, right?
Yeah,
But
you're gonna have to. You'd have to really dial down the score because Scott Rude's a hard ass.
you know what? And it might know that. It might figure that out.
It would
which would be
probably
pretty
figure that out by
fascinating.
now. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty funny.
All right. Well, any other last tidbits or last bits of advice for listeners as they're thinking about applying for NAFA 100 Best?
Not really, but just make sure you apply. I mean, that's the key. I was talking in a podcast this morning. What can you do consistency wise? And I always remember this quote by Arnold Schwarzenegger: "Just get to the gym. Just get to the gym."
Yeah.
And there's days where I am sick as a dog, but I get to the gym. And then once you get there, then you might lift 2 pounds, and then you might walk, 15 feet, and that's the whole thing. Is just get there.
Yep.
So get your application filled out, and get it finished, and move on.
Wise words.
Yep.
Get to the gym.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for us on this week's episode of the Fleet Success Show. Steve, always a pleasure having
It's
you
an
in the
awesome.
studio.
I love being on these podcasts.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, well, till next time. Thanks, guys.
Take care.
We hope you enjoyed the show. If you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others. Post about it on LinkedIn or leave a review. Want to learn more about our fleet management software, Fleet 360? Check us out at rtafleet.com. If you want to learn more about having your fleet evaluated by our consulting team, go to fleetconsulting.com.